King Charles confirms William's coronation date, as Catherine prepares historic ceremony. The confirmation reportedly came inside a sealed royal document, delivered after an emergency meeting at Windsor, one containing a date, a ceremonial timetable, and a private instruction that left Catherine facing the greatest responsibility of her royal life. William read the first page in silence. Catherine stood beside him. Princess Anne watched from across the room. Camilla appeared stunned by one section of the arrangements. And when Charles finally explained why the date had been selected, William reportedly asked the question nobody else wanted to say aloud. "Why are we discussing my coronation while you are still king?" Charles did not appear offended. He did not close the folder. He simply looked at his eldest son and answered, "Because a crown must be prepared before the country is asked to watch it move." That was when everyone in the room understood. Charles was not announcing an abdication. He was not surrendering the throne. He was not claiming that William would become king immediately. He was establishing a protected ceremonial date, a date the palace could activate when succession eventually occurred, allowing the next coronation to proceed without months of confusion, internal conflict, and competing plans. The date had been chosen. The abbey had been quietly consulted. Security teams had begun mapping routes. The government had reviewed the preliminary timetable, and Catherine had been selected to lead the preparation of what palace insiders were already calling the most carefully modernized coronation in recent history. But the greatest shock was hidden deeper inside the document. Charles had reportedly given Catherine final authority over the family structure surrounding the ceremony. She would decide how George, Charlotte, and Louis participated. She would coordinate Princess Anne, Edward, Sophie, and the senior working royals. She would help determine Camilla's place in the transition. She would protect William from being consumed by the machinery of his own accession. And she would do all of it while knowing that the ceremony she was preparing could happen only after the end of Charles's reign. That was the burden inside the honor. Catherine was not preparing an ordinary royal event. She was preparing the moment her husband would become king, and the moment her children's lives would change forever. Before we examine the secret date, Catherine's historic plan, Camilla's reaction, and the private reason Charles decided everything had to be settled now, subscribe to the channel. We follow the royal stories unfolding behind palace doors, and explain how one quiet decision can shape the monarchy years before the public sees it. To understand why Charles confirmed the coronation plan, we have to go back to a confidential review that exposed a serious weakness inside the palace. The monarchy had plans for succession. It had procedures for official mourning. It had communication systems connecting the sovereign, government, church, military, and royal households. It knew how the crown would legally pass. The coronation was different. A coronation does not create a king. William would become king immediately when Charles's reign ended, long before any crown was placed on his head. The ceremony would come later. Its purpose would be to consecrate, recognize, and publicly present the new sovereign. That delay created a problem. How long should the country wait? How much mourning should pass before celebration began? Which royal household would control the planning? Would Charles's advisors continue shaping the ceremony after his reign? Would William inherit an old plan designed around somebody else's assumptions? Would Catherine be treated as a participant or as one of the ceremony's central architects? And how could George be included without making a child feel that his grandfather's absence had become the beginning of his own rise? Earlier coronation preparations had remained broad and theoretical. There were archived plans, historical precedents, church procedures, security frameworks, lists of ceremonial objects, government guidance. Nothing had been united into one clear structure, reflecting William and Catherine's actual priorities. Charles believed that was dangerous. A succession would bring emotional shock, national attention, international pressure, and thousands of decisions at once. The family would be grieving. William would immediately inherit constitutional duties. Catherine would need to support him while protecting their children. Camilla would be entering a painful and uncertain new position. Anne, Edward, and Sophie would face increased workloads. Government officials would require rapid decisions. If the coronation framework remained unresolved, every old palace rivalry would return at the worst possible moment. Charles ordered a complete review. At first, William resisted. He believed detailed coronation planning while his father remained active could appear disrespectful. Charles understood the concern. He also considered it sentimental. A future king could not wait for a national crisis before deciding how he intended to present his reign. Preparation was not betrayal. Silence was not loyalty. Charles reportedly told him, "You do not honor me by leaving chaos behind me." William reluctantly agreed. He established a small planning group. Catherine joined from the beginning. Anne was asked to review family roles. The Archbishop's representatives examined ceremonial requirements. The Lord Chamberlain's office studied logistics. Security officials began testing routes. Government advisors considered the national timetable. The group's first task was to determine how long the coronation should follow the accession. Historical examples varied. Political circumstances mattered. National mourning mattered. Church preparation mattered. Security mattered. The new king's readiness mattered. Charles wanted a date framework that allowed enough time for mourning and preparation without leaving the country in an extended period of uncertainty. William initially proposed a long interval. He wanted the family to grieve privately before the machinery of coronation consumed them. Catherine supported emotional space, but warned that a delay without a clear timetable could create pressure of its own. Every public appearance would become a coronation question. Every family movement would be interpreted. Every palace meeting would create rumors. George would hear strangers discussing the moment constantly. A confirmed date, even one scheduled months away, could create stability. Anne agreed. The crown passed immediately. The ceremony should not appear hurried. It should not drift indefinitely either. The planning team proposed a protected seasonal window. The exact day would remain confidential until succession occurred and practical circumstances were known. But the palace would prepare one primary date and two alternatives. The arrangements could be activated quickly. The abbey would know. The government would know. Security would know. The family would know. The public would receive the announcement when the proper time came. Charles reviewed the proposal. Then he went further. He selected the primary date himself. Not because he wanted to control William's future reign, because the date carried personal meaning. It fell within a period associated with renewal, national gathering, and one of the royal family's most significant historical transitions. Charles believed the symbolism mattered. William believed the practical conditions mattered more. The weather would be manageable. The parliamentary calendar could accommodate the event. International guests could travel. The military would have sufficient preparation time. Public viewing areas could be secured. The date worked. William approved it. Catherine did not speak immediately. The others noticed. She understood what the date represented more personally than the officials did. A day had now been selected for William to wear the crown. That meant somebody had placed a marker beyond Charles's reign. Even though no one knew when the succession would occur, the future had stopped feeling abstract. It had entered a calendar. Charles asked whether Catherine objected. She said no. Then she asked whether the children needed to know. William believed they should not receive the exact date. George understood that his father would one day become king. He did not need to live with a specific coronation timetable while his grandfather remained on the throne. Catherine agreed. The planning could protect the future without forcing the children to imagine loss. That principle became the foundation of her entire ceremonial strategy. The coronation would recognize succession. It would not celebrate death. It would begin William's reign without appearing to erase Charles's. It would present George's future without stealing his childhood. It would elevate Catherine without turning Camilla into a discarded symbol of the previous reign. Achieving all of that would be extraordinarily difficult. That was why Charles placed Catherine at the center. The original planning structure had been led mainly by senior officials. Each department focused on its own responsibility. The church focused on sacred ritual. The palace focused on royal protocol. The government focused on constitutional and diplomatic requirements. Security focused on risk. Broadcast teams focused on imagery. Military planners focused on procession and ceremony. Nobody held the complete emotional picture of the family. Catherine did. She understood William's vision. She understood Charles's sensitivity. She understood Camilla's fear of public rejection. She trusted Anne's judgment. She worked closely with Sophie. She knew George's limits. She understood Charlotte's awareness and Louis's energy. She could see how one ceremonial choice might affect every person differently. Charles called her to a private meeting. William attended. No staff remained in the room. The king explained that he wanted Catherine to serve as the royal family ceremony coordinator for the future coronation. The official-sounding title mattered less than its practical meaning. She would not control the sacred ritual. She would not dictate constitutional requirements. She would not overrule the government or the church. She would lead the family's participation. Who entered with whom? Where the children stood. How senior royals were recognized. How Camilla was honored. Which relatives appeared on the balcony. How the ceremony balanced the current family with the future one. Catherine was surprised. She asked why Anne had not been chosen. Charles said Anne understood duty better than almost anyone. Catherine understood the emotional architecture of the family. Anne could challenge her decisions. Catherine needed to shape them. William supported the appointment immediately. Catherine remained hesitant. She knew what would happen if any detail became controversial. If Camilla received a prominent place, critics would say Catherine was weak. If Camilla's role was limited, others would accuse Catherine of revenge. If George participated strongly, Catherine would be accused of pushing him forward. If she protected him, critics would claim the future heir was unprepared. If the ceremony became shorter, traditionalists would blame William and Catherine. If it remained elaborate, the public might call it wasteful. There was no version without criticism. Charles said that was why the responsibility required someone who did not chase approval. Catherine accepted. Her first decision concerned the central theme. William's advisors had suggested service for a new generation. Catherine believed the phrase sounded like a campaign slogan. Charles's team preferred language centered on continuity. Anne considered most ceremonial themes unnecessary. The coronation itself carried meaning. Catherine proposed a simpler principle: inheritance of duty. The words would not necessarily appear publicly. They would guide every choice. William was not inheriting privilege alone. He was inheriting responsibility. Catherine was not receiving jewels alone. She was inheriting the burden of supporting the sovereign. George was not moving closer to power. He was inheriting preparation. The wider family was not losing prominence. It was inheriting the duty to support a new structure. Charles approved the principle. Anne called it honest. The second decision concerned the length of the ceremony. William wanted it shorter than earlier coronations. Charles agreed that modern audiences required clarity, but he warned against stripping away the sacred elements that separated a coronation from an ordinary public inauguration. Catherine reviewed every stage: recognition, oath, anointing, investiture, crowning, enthronement, homage, communion, procession. She asked one question about each element. Does this explain duty, or merely display tradition? The anointing remained essential. It expressed the spiritual burden placed upon the sovereign. The oath remained essential. The king had to promise service under law. The crowning remained central. The recognition allowed the people represented inside the abbey to acknowledge the monarch. Other parts could be shortened, combined, or explained more clearly. William approved. Charles resisted one proposed reduction. The argument continued for nearly an hour. Anne eventually intervened. She told Charles that tradition survived through meaning, not duration. A ritual did not become more sacred because people were forced to sit through repeated versions of the same idea. Charles accepted a shorter structure. Catherine had won her first major decision. She did not treat it as victory. The king's coronation remained partly Charles's legacy too. He understood the ritual through experience William had not yet lived. Catherine continued consulting him. That preserved trust. The third decision concerned Camilla. This was the most delicate. When William became king, Catherine would become queen. Camilla's position would change immediately. She would no longer be the reigning queen beside the sovereign. She would become the widow of the previous king, assuming the succession followed Charles's death. No modern palace manual could remove the emotional impact of that transition. Charles wanted Camilla treated with honor. William did not want the opening image of his reign dominated by the previous queen. Catherine wanted to avoid making either woman appear to defeat the other. The first plan gave Camilla a highly prominent place near the central ceremonial group. William's advisors objected. The coronation should visually establish the new reign. Charles defended the arrangement. Catherine requested a private conversation with Camilla. She did not present a completed decision. She asked what Camilla wanted. Camilla reportedly answered that she did not want to be displayed as a grieving relic from another reign. She did not want to be hidden either. She wanted a position that acknowledged Charles without making her look as though she were competing with Catherine. That honesty helped. Catherine designed a distinct entrance for Camilla before the main royal procession. She would be received formally as the widow of the previous sovereign. Her seat would be prominent. She would witness William and Catherine's crowning. She would join the family gathering after the ceremony. But she would not stand at the center of the new sovereign's procession. Charles initially considered the arrangement too limited. Camilla accepted it. She understood the balance better than he did. Her dignity would be protected. The new reign would remain visually clear. The fourth decision concerned Anne, Edward, and Sophie. William wanted the ceremony focused around the direct line. Catherine warned him against creating the impression that his monarchy consisted only of himself, his wife, and their children. The institution still depended on experienced working royals. Anne had served for decades. Edward carried responsibilities tied to the legacy of Prince Philip. Sophie had become one of the family's most reliable figures. Excluding them from visible responsibility would communicate ingratitude. Catherine proposed a collective act of service. The senior working royals would not individually perform long rituals. They would stand together during a short commitment to support the sovereign's work. Anne disliked anything that looked like theatrical loyalty. Catherine adjusted the wording. The moment would focus on shared duty to the country. not personal submission to William. Anne accepted. Edward and Sophie supported the plan. William saw the value. The new reign would appear smaller, but not isolated. Then came George. Every planner understood that the young prince would become the most watched child in the world during his father's coronation. He would stand directly behind William in the line of succession. Every expression would be analyzed. Every movement would become a symbol. Some advisors wanted George to perform a significant ceremonial role. Carry an object. Approach the throne. Stand alone during part of the service. Appear beside William during a formal recognition of the next generation. Catherine rejected the strongest proposals. She remembered how royal childhood could be consumed by public meaning. George would already be dealing with the emotional reality of his grandfather's absence and his father's transformation into king. That was enough. William agreed that George needed protection. He also believed the country required a visible sign of continuity. Their first serious disagreement began. William argued that George could perform one short, meaningful duty without being overwhelmed. Catherine said the decision should depend on George's age and emotional readiness when the time came. The coronation date could be planned. His feelings could not. She refused to lock him into a role years in advance. Charles supported her. That surprised William. The king said he knew what it meant to grow up with future duty waiting inside every room. George should be prepared. He should not be staged. The final plan created 3 options. A significant role, if George felt ready. A smaller family role, if he wanted to participate without becoming the center. Or no formal duty beyond attending beside Catherine and his siblings. The decision would be made close to the ceremony. George would be consulted privately. He would not be asked to choose between disappointing the country and protecting himself. Catherine considered that protection non-negotiable. Charlotte's role became the next question. Some officials treated her mainly as support for George. Catherine objected. Charlotte was a royal child with her own identity, not a ceremonial assistant to her brother. She would receive an age-appropriate role, reflecting service rather than succession. Possibilities included joining Catherine during a charitable presentation or participating in a family procession with Sophie. Louis's involvement would depend entirely on his age and readiness. No one would force him into a long ceremony simply to complete a perfect family image. The children would be part of the day. They would not become decorations. Catherine's next concern was the guest list. The abbey could not hold everyone who expected to attend. Diplomats, heads of state, government leaders, religious representatives, military figures, royal families from around the world, charity leaders, community representatives, members of the aristocracy, family friends, former staff, people with historical claims to ceremonial positions. William wanted a smaller guest list. Charles wanted continuity with long-standing relationships. Government officials required broad international representation. Catherine proposed a new balance. Traditional seats would remain for people whose roles carried current constitutional or ceremonial meaning. Others would no longer receive places automatically through inherited expectation. The freed seats would go to people representing service, nurses, teachers, emergency workers, military families, young community leaders, scientists, charity volunteers, people from across the nations and regions of the United Kingdom. William loved the idea. Charles worried it would anger old families who considered coronation access part of their historical relationship with the crown. Anne's answer was direct. A coronation should represent the country the king would serve, not merely the families who had attended the previous one. The new structure passed. Catherine's influence became visible throughout the plan, not because she dominated every conversation, because she repeatedly connected royal symbolism to human consequence. When security wanted the children separated, she asked what the separation would do emotionally. When broadcasters wanted stronger images, she asked whether those images placed pressure on the family. When officials wanted more elaborate ceremony, she asked what the public would understand. When William wanted greater modernization, she asked what would be lost. When Charles defended tradition, she asked what still carried meaning. She became the bridge. That was exactly why the king had selected her. The hidden coronation date remained the most sensitive part of the document. Only a small group knew it. The abbey received the information through restricted channels. Security teams used coded planning references. Government officials treated it as provisional. The royal family did not discuss it outside authorized meetings. Then a date appeared in a private diary belonging to a senior official. No ceremony was named. Only a block of reserved time and a series of initials. Someone noticed. Rumors began. A future royal event had been scheduled. The abbey was protecting a date. Military planners had received unusual advance instructions. Hotel and diplomatic schedules were being reviewed. The story moved through private political and media circles. Was Charles preparing to abdicate? Had William's coronation been scheduled? Was the king's health worse than the palace admitted? The speculation alarmed Charles. He had wanted preparation without panic. The leaked clues created the opposite. William believed the palace should deny that any date existed. Charles refused. A direct denial would become dishonest. If the truth emerged later, trust would suffer. Catherine proposed a different response. Confirm planning, reject immediacy. The palace could acknowledge that long-term coronation arrangements existed as part of responsible continuity, while making clear that Charles remained king and no immediate accession event had been announced. William worried the public would hear only the word coronation. Anne believed the rumor would grow anyway. Camilla supported Catherine. Silence would encourage people to imagine something worse. Charles agreed. That led to the confirmation at the center of the title. The palace prepared a statement explaining that future ceremonial dates and contingency arrangements were routinely reviewed to protect constitutional continuity. It did not reveal the exact date. It did not announce an abdication. It did not say William would be crowned soon. But inside the family, Charles went further. He formally approved the primary coronation date and authorized Catherine to continue full ceremonial planning. The sealed document was signed. William received a copy. Catherine received the planning authority. Anne witnessed the decision. The date was now more than a suggestion. It had become the palace's protected plan. William reportedly remained uncomfortable. After the meeting, he asked Charles whether confirming the date made the succession feel too close. Charles answered that the succession had always been close. Every monarch ruled beside the fact that the crown would one day leave them. Refusing to prepare did not create distance from that truth. It only made the eventual transition more chaotic. William said he did not want people waiting for his father's reign to end. Charles replied, "Then give them no reason to wait. Serve now. Prepare quietly. Let the date remain only a safeguard." That advice changed William's perspective. The confirmed plan did not need to become a countdown. It could remain what Charles intended. A promise that when grief and constitutional change eventually arrived, the country would not be forced to watch the family argue about ceremony. Catherine's reaction was more emotional. She had spent months discussing the ceremony professionally. Guest lists, children's roles, processions, security, music, family positions. Now Charles's signature made everything real. One day, she would enter the abbey as Princess of Wales. She would leave as queen. William would carry the crown. George would become the direct heir. Charlotte and Louis would move into a new relationship with the monarchy. Camilla would be grieving. Anne would be supporting another sovereign. The country would be watching them during one of the most private transitions hidden inside public ceremony. Catherine reportedly took the file home. She did not open it that evening. She placed it inside her secure office and spent time with the children. That choice revealed what guided her entire approach. The ceremony mattered. The family came first. The following morning, Catherine began the next stage of planning. Music. She wanted the service to contain the sounds of the entire United Kingdom. Traditional sacred pieces would remain. New compositions would be commissioned. Welsh music would have a clear place, reflecting William and Catherine's connection to the title they currently held. Scottish, English, and Northern Irish traditions would be represented carefully. Young performers would join established choirs. The ceremony would feel historic, without becoming frozen in one era. Charles supported the idea. William wanted one composition connected to Diana's memory. This created tension. A coronation was not a family memorial. Yet Diana's absence would be felt in every image of William becoming king. Catherine understood. She proposed a quiet musical reference rather than a public dedication. People who recognized it would understand. The ceremony would not be turned into a story about old conflict. William accepted. Charles reportedly found the idea painful but appropriate. Diana had shaped the future king. Ignoring that truth would make the ceremony emotionally incomplete. Catherine also insisted on one private moment before the public procession. William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis would gather alone. No photographers, no officials, no ceremony staff, just the family. William would speak to the children. He would remind them that the day did not change how he loved them. Catherine would explain that public duty would grow, but home would remain home. The children could ask questions. They could show fear. They could remain silent. No one would enter until the family was ready. William considered the private moment unnecessary at first. The schedule would be extremely tight. Catherine refused to remove it. The most important people in the new king's life would not receive less attention than the procession. Anne supported her. The private family meeting remained. Charles later learned about it. He reportedly said he wished earlier royal generations had understood the importance of moments like that. The final balcony arrangement produced another conflict. William wanted only the central working family. Himself, Catherine, their children, Anne, Edward, Sophie, perhaps a very small number of others. Charles believed Camilla needed to appear. William agreed after Catherine reminded him that her absence would look punitive. Harry's position created the most difficult question. Would he attend the coronation? Would Meghan? Would their children? Would Harry stand with the family afterward? No decision could be made years in advance. Relationships could improve. They could worsen. Security circumstances could change. William did not want the issue included in the protected plan. Catherine believed the document needed options. One arrangement if Harry attended as family. Another if he participated in a limited ceremonial capacity. A third if he did not attend. No emotional debate would be allowed to derail the planning during accession. Anne supported the contingency approach. Charles was saddened that his younger son's presence had to be treated as a security and protocol question. He approved it anyway. Responsible planning required space for painful realities. The ceremony budget received intense review. William wanted restraint. The coronation still required security, military coordination, international hospitality, broadcasting, transport, and ceremonial preparation. Even a shorter event would cost significant public money. Catherine argued that restraint should be visible, not theatrical. Removing small ceremonial details would not matter if the overall event remained disconnected from public life. She proposed that coronation-linked service projects begin across the country before the ceremony. Community restoration, youth volunteering, support for carers, environmental work. Local celebrations designed by communities rather than dictated from London. The coronation would become more than one day. William supported the idea. Charles warned against turning sacred ceremony into public relations. Catherine agreed. The service projects would not replace the coronation. They would express the duty the ceremony promised. The plan became known privately as the Crown Service Program. It would begin only after accession. No one wanted to create the appearance that the country was already preparing for Charles's departure. When the time came, the program would give people a way to participate without needing a place inside the abbey. That may become Catherine's most historic contribution. Earlier coronations invited the nation to watch. Her plan would ask the nation to serve. The final document grew larger. The date, the backup dates, the service structure, family roles, security options, guest categories, music, transport, children's protections, Camilla's position, Harry contingencies, the service program, communication plans. Every section carried Catherine's influence. Charles reviewed the completed framework. He made only 3 major changes. First, he strengthened the acknowledgement of the previous reign. William's coronation would not begin by pretending history had restarted. Second, he protected certain sacred rituals from further reduction. Third, he added a private letter to William. The letter would not be opened during planning. It would be delivered after accession, before the coronation. William asked what it contained. Charles refused to say. The future king would receive the words when they belonged to him. Catherine knew better than to press. Some parts of succession had to remain between father and son. The emergency palace meeting ended with the final approval. Charles signed. William signed. Catherine accepted leadership of the family ceremony. Anne signed as witness. Camilla added her acknowledgement to the section concerning the transition between queens. The room remained quiet. There was no celebration. Charles folded his glasses and placed them beside the document. William looked emotional. Catherine held the pen for several seconds before signing. The date was confirmed. But nobody inside the room treated it as an approaching event. It was a plan waiting behind the present. Charles would continue his reign. William would continue preparing. Catherine would continue shaping the ceremony quietly. Anne would continue testing every decision against duty. Camilla would continue standing beside the king while preparing herself for a future she did not want to imagine. The public statement released later was carefully written. King Charles remained fully engaged in his constitutional role. Long-term ceremonial planning formed part of normal continuity preparations. No immediate coronation announcement had been made. The line of succession remained unchanged. The palace would provide information when appropriate. The statement calmed some people. Others treated it as confirmation that something major was being prepared. In one sense, they were correct. Something major had been prepared. Not a sudden accession. A stable one. Charles had done what few people find easy. He had planned for a future in which he was no longer at the center. William had done something equally difficult. He had accepted his father's guidance without treating preparation as inheritance before its time. Catherine had accepted the hardest role of all. She would shape a historic ceremony while protecting a grieving family from being swallowed by it. That is why Charles trusted her. Officials could plan the route. The church could plan the sacred ritual. The government could plan the constitutional timetable. Security teams could protect the procession. Only Catherine could look at the entire ceremony and ask what each decision would do to the people living inside it. She would prepare William to be seen as king. She would prepare George to be seen as heir. She would protect Charlotte and Louis from disappearing into their brother's future. She would honor Camilla without surrendering the center of the new reign. She would recognize Anne, Edward, and Sophie. She would leave a place for reconciliation without allowing uncertainty to control the ceremony. And she would help the country move from one monarch to the next, without presenting grief and continuity as enemies. King Charles did not confirm the date because his reign was over. He confirmed it because his responsibility was not. The crown belongs to the present sovereign. The future of the crown must be prepared by the present one. One day, the sealed plan may be opened. The abbey doors may close. The bells may begin. William may walk toward the chair prepared for him. Catherine may enter knowing every detail was shaped during conversations with the king, who could no longer stand beside them. George may take the role he feels ready to carry. Charlotte and Louis may remain close. Anne may stand as the bridge between generations. Camilla may watch the next queen receive the crown she once wore beside Charles. And the country may believe the historic ceremony came together within a few extraordinary months. It will not know how long the planning truly began. Inside a guarded room, before the public announcement, before accession, before national mourning, before William was king. Charles selected the date. Catherine built the ceremony. And the monarchy quietly prepared to survive the moment nobody inside the family was ready to lose.